Okay, you ready, Larry?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna take us off. Oh
Did you set
gosh,
the timer?
what's that?
Why does the timer say live in five,
I,
four,
I
four?
had to I had to switch it back because it
Oh, I'm sorry.
no,
Oh,
it's okay, it's okay.
I thought I had another 30 seconds. I'm sorry. I just went to get a drink and then I was clicking our. Okay.
Okay,
Jesus Christ, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay, that's okay.
Give people.
Um, I don't know what happened to my camera. Hold on, I just need a second to try
I
to
feel
get
like
this.
something is. Okay. Well, I guess I can see our images now here. Let me. Okay. Okay. This is a case of the restream window is. Yeah.
Okay, you ready, Larry?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Okay.
just remembering that there's so much. There's like 5 to 10 seconds delay
Yep.
on the restream window. It's like don't get sucked up into it. In fact, I've got it large here, but
Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna bring us in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life Support Live. I am Dr. Ali Mattu, and as always, I am joined by my friend and colleague, Dr. Trek himself, Larry
yes.
Nemecek. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Ali. As I always like to say, two doctors, one of us is actually real.
And we'll leave it to you to determine which one that is. Um, it's week episode 3, I think, for us for life support,
It
and
is episode 3. Yes.
yeah, and we are gonna dive into what is my one of my favorite moments in Star Trek this week. We're diving into Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, 3, The Search for Spock, 4, The Voyage Home, and in particular, what topic are we exploring today, Larry?
It's almost like it's a trilogy.
It is. It is.
It's like, to me, it's like the first. Well, I mean, the motion picture has a lot of moments and a lot of fans, but it's like, to me, it's like that trilogy defines the Star Trek movie experience, and the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few, or the few or the one. Anyway, that's like such a classic movie trope, and it's so attributed to The Wrath of Khan, and then people forget about how it spilled over into the other two follow-ups as well, especially 3. But yeah, it's a line that you say that and people immediately think of Star Trek. I mean, it has roots in literature and folklore before that, but it's such a Star Trek moment, and it really, after the motion picture was kind of, I don't want to say wobbly, but after people weren't totally satisfied with the motion picture, it really helped define the Star Trek cinema experience, if you will. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, to get things started, let us know what moment do you think from Star Trek 2, 3, and 4 is most relevant to our lives right now in 2020? There's so
Huh.
many moments to draw from there. I think you could go in so many different angles. So I'm super excited to see how people are going to respond to that. So what moment do you think resonates from this trilogy that's all about the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the one, or the few, or not, as Kirk told us at the end of Star Trek 3? Gosh, so much to explore today.
We should remind everybody, hey, if you're with us live right now, this is great. If you're after later on, thanks for joining us later. Maybe you can be with us live, because right now when you're live, we've got the chat open on all of our channels. I'm waiting for our first Twitch person to show up, if that's...
There is one viewer who keeps tuning in on Twitch, so welcome to our one person on Twitch.
In Twitch, South Antarctica. But on YouTube at The Psych Show, on Facebook at Larry Nemecek's Trekland. You have the Psych Show spot on Facebook as well.
Yep.
I'm going to turn my YouTube channel on one of these days, but come wherever you're coming from. Come to us live, chat, and then also now we need to explore this some more because we may be having some glitches with it.
Sure.
But supposedly you can join us on camera. The way
Yes.
Brian did on our first episode,
Yeah.
on Skype at Life Support Host.
You can be this a third person here. You can join in by video chat. You can also join in by audio chat. We'd love to see you if possible. We'll be having that at the end, but we'd also love to have you in audio. And you can also comment below or to the side, depending on wherever you are. I think everywhere it's below. You can comment below.
I want to do one of those. Yes. I never.
Our one viewer from Twitch. Rise Racelin 53. Hi Larry, it's Boyd. I am the one viewer on Twitch. Ha ha ha.
And the iconic viewer, the iconic no image avatar for Twitch there reminds me of the Will Rogers dog iron brand.
There you go.
Okay, that was obscure. I know, but I can't help it.
But
bizarre.
on brand for you, Larry. But that is on brand for you.
Other brand. But that's awesome, Boyd. Now we know we have a face almost to a name. Okay.
So, what we are doing here, we're going to roll into our first segment. We just want to say hi to everyone. Anika, I want to say hello, even though you haven't seen a single episode of Star Trek. We are happy to have you here.
Hey.
There's so many great people. Gerard, welcome back. It's so great to see you here week after week. Rebecca, welcome. You're late, but you were on time because we started a few seconds late as well. So it's all good. It's all good.
It's a little cross pond, and Rebecca's across the pond coming in. So Christoph is in Austria. Some of these are my Portales and my Trekland Tuesdays folk. I recognize, and there's some new folks too. So yay to everybody.
Libby is back here. There's a 10-second delay between the platforms. Yes, it is like a time anomaly. So welcome back to the familiar faces. If this is your first time here, we're happy to have you here. Larry, what do we do on life support? What the heck is this all about?
Well, come on. You know what life support is.
I know what it is. Do they know what it is? I don't know.
We have a mission, Ali. What is our mission?
Our mission is to have an exploration of how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
Just as a famous starship captain once said, and just as another famous starship captain once said, along the way, we're going to have a little fun.
So we're going to have fun. We're going to talk about Star Trek. We're going to talk about how it can help us and help us navigate all this stuff that we're going through, because we're all going through a ton of stuff. So let's go into the briefing room. Let's talk about this. So Larry, we are talking about the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. So I think we should jump into Wrath of Khan here. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Help us understand where this massively iconic phrase, where it comes from in story, and also maybe behind the scenes, if you have any tidbits for us for how this emerged.
Yeah, the Wrath of Khan story, which now is amazing. It's a lot like some of the best things in life are the best things in Star Trek. The best things are the things that have the most, Mulligan stew origins, the most the mixed mutt breed is the best dog kind of thing situation sometimes, because the Wrath of Khan story came from like 5 different scripts that they weren't happy with, that different writers had given, and Nick Meyer, when he was brought in to direct and knew very little about Star Trek, which is another one of the amazing stories about Wrath of Khan, which goes up now to be the bar. Everyone of any era, it's the bar that people ascribe to still. Right?
Yeah.
As far as everything, plot, structure, villain, enjoyment.
Gosh, the score. Oh my gosh, I love the score,
the
uniforms, the design, everything about that film.
But it had such a troubled start, and Nick Meyer goes in, doesn't even get credit. He's like, oh, damn it, just let's get a movie and go with it. I don't care about ego and guild rules and whatever. And he pulls this story together, and it's basically what we know of. And the roots of all those different stories had pieces that got pulled from. And Savick is in one, and the Genesis device is in another. But that overall arc, that what we think of now, the needs of the many outweigh the needs. It's basically, there's a time to think of everybody. There's a time to think of yourself, or there's a time to think of one. There's a time to sacrifice, and there's a time to, that's the best thing, which is the ultimate story of Wrath of Khan, is the sacrifice that Spock dies. And the movie went into the tank with, Leonard Nimoy's, just like Brent Spiner did with Nemesis. It was like, okay, we're done with this character. Let's kill it off. And if we're going to do that, let's go out with a bang. We'll be very cinematic. And that was the initial point of course, that the movie was so well done that Leonard's like, okay, maybe let me think about this again.
Well, and the thing, the context here is we had Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which was a very expensive film that took what was going to be Star Trek Phase 2, a new TV show, and it took ideas from that and was trying to in some ways compete with Star Wars. Paramount was looking at the success of Star Wars and saying, like, do we have anything like this? Let's put it on big screen. And so Star Trek Phase 2 got turned into this pilot. But Star Trek, the motion picture I think it's amazing. The idea that humanity just sent out the Voyager probe and it coming back, I think that was an incredibly amazing idea to explore in science fiction. It wasn't quite the success they were looking for, though, the commercial success. Am I right in saying that, Larry?
Well, it was a mulligan stew too, times 10 to even compare to Wrath of Khan. But it had all the emotional baggage of the 70s. It had the emotional baggage of the first Star Trek Rebirth. It was a big political animal, and it had a lot of emotion. Roddenberry's stature tied up with just the studio wanting to do something, and the whole world scrambling. It's amazing that Star Wars wouldn't have gotten financed if not for Star Trek.
Yeah.
And yet it was like a cyclical thing that Star Wars kicked in the whole sci-fi boom to the point where, yes, Paramount was like, we've got to do something. We got that thing that we've been playing footsie with for 10 years about having a rebirth in some form. Fine, let's pull the plug on that little series and we'll make it a movie. And then it became such a thing. Then it was a case of, and then they had a visual effects debacle in the middle of that where they had to change people. And it was one of those cases of keep throwing money at it until we finally birth the damn thing. And not unlike Discovery.
Well, and this, there's so many themes here that keep replaying. The connection between Star Trek and Star Wars. We see that now decades later with J.J. Abrams really perfecting his craft on Star Trek 2009, Star Trek Into Darkness, taking that to Star Wars The Force Awakens. There's so many connections here between the franchise, and we could do the whole episode on Gene Roddenberry, George Lucas, and how they were actually friends and colleagues before, like, these franchises became these things that you couldn't talk about. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is the motion picture was like massively expensive, big sets, so many.
It was a movie.
Yeah, it was a huge tentpole event, and Wrath of Khan is a very intimate story with not a ton of sets. It's submarine warfare. It's iconic in so many ways, but it's such a it's a very
TV movie, which is how it started.
Yeah.
Scope was pulled back to being a big TV movie, and then it kind of leapt off the screen, and they went, oh, okay, then we'll elevate parts of it. But they went into it with we got to recover from this bloated situation, and don't blame everything on Robert Wise or Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
All the costs of 10 years of developing that, playing footsie with Star Trek's Rebirth, through all those incarnations, all those costs got dumped on the motion picture. So when they say, oh, the motion picture cost X amount of money, it was millions of all the scripts that had been written for Phase 2, the series, all the sets that were built and then scrapped were thrown into the motion picture too. So, but it was not a satisfying outcome. And the Wrath of Khan, the basic, the tagline, I think, for Wrath of Khan for most people was, now that's more like it.
Right. It's so fun. This is not the motion picture episode, but we're still living with all the work that was done with the motion picture. The design, one possible design for the Enterprise became the Star Trek the USS Discovery design. And the theme for the motion picture became the theme for the Next Generation, which we heard again in Star Trek Picard. So all of these things keep going around and around. It's all the circle of life. It's, everything's happened before and will happen again. It's all this stuff. But we're here for Wrath of Khan. So the needs of the many, Larry, had we heard anything like this before Wrath of Khan from Vulcan lore, Vulcan teachings? Had we heard anything like that in the original series?
Not really. The big Vulcan thing was, of course, Idic, infinite diversity, infinite combination. Everything Vulcanish was more that way. Everything was about moods and emotions and the lack of emotion, the stifling of emotion bad. Emotion, we almost blew ourselves up, everything was down that way with Vulcan. And then the parts of Vulcan that were a little mystical, like, self-healing, and what's the new piece of Vulcan physiology we need to trot out this week for the MacGuffin?
Right.
In eyelid. Oh, the heart is down here. We have super strength, those kinds of things. So this philosophy of, needs the many, needs outweigh the one or the few is kind of Vulcan-ish, but it never gets really set in stone. It really kind of I don't want to say becomes generic, but anyway, it's kind of about the time the movie is all caught up with the aging theme, and we're going to introduce these new characters, and then this Genesis device and weaponry and Khan and bringing back. People are all. There's so many throwbacks and callbacks that sacrificial arc kind of comes out of nowhere. It's like the sum of all the parts, and then when you get down to the end, it's like, oh no. If you hadn't heard the spoiler, because this movie was big time spoiled, and there was a huge we hate this movie if you kill off Spock. If you kill
Spock, yeah.
Right. There was a big old-time fan marketing effort, and they did a professional survey and said your box office will drop 23. I'm making these numbers up. 23% in your licensing revenue will, from merchandise will drop 42% if you kill off Spock, and your future movies will be nil. And there was really a big amount. It's hard to imagine this now, but there was a huge, given the foresight at the time, no one knew there would be a third movie and they'd bring him back, and then Leonard would change heart, and fans didn't get it that Leonard wanted this. That's what's hysterical about it.
Yeah.
They thought it was Paramount, throwing its weight around and trying to kill off Star, or they're going to go off and hire a bunch of kids to come in and recast the roles or something.
That'll happen later. That was a few decades away at that point,
or still to come. But yeah, you have to put yourself back in the mindset of the fan. You talk about fan ownership, the people that brought it back after 10 years. It's like, guys, you wouldn't be making this money if it wasn't for us. You wouldn't have these jobs if it wasn't for us. So that's all in the mix that now sitting back here 54 years later and 47 different spinoff, it's hard to put yourself back in that mindset of where Star Trek and fandom and the suits and the bean counters were at the time. But yeah, so everybody was really happy with Wrath of Khan, including Leonard, changed his mind. They even filmed the bit at the end, the little tag at the end of the coffin the photon torpedo coffin resting in Golden Gate Park.
The coffin, the very, very end of that. Oh, that was something added in later.
Oh yeah, last minute. Yes, after they did the focus groups, and it ends with him dying, and they're on the bridge. He'll always live as long as we remember it. And that was all in there.
Yeah.
But still, the focus group audiences were coming out like just depressed as hell.
Yeah. The remember bit.
No one got it at the time how it would affect people. So the whole coffin and Golden Gate Park with the hint of what's to come.
Yeah.
The whole remember thing was just they threw that in case they ever wanted to use it again, and then they just very quickly decided, oh hell yeah, we want to use it again.
Yeah. And so there's so many layers to this that I want to explore. Like, it's funny because they added in the Kobayashi Maru bit to try and give people a bit of a distraction, like, oh, Spock dies, but yeah, no, that only happens in that first scene.
Right.
No, you heard wrong. So it's just so fascinating, that moment as it relates to fandom, which is a topic we're going to explore on Life Support in the near future. Then you have the search for Spock. you have more money, more budget. You see an expansion of
Mm.
Starfleet, that beautiful starbase that is reused over and over and over again. We see the Excelsior. We see it is a bigger story that's told, but it's a story that kind of flips things around. If Wrath of Khan is about life and death and revenge and love of your friends and sacrifice and serving this mission, Search for Spock is about sacrificing so many of these things for the people you care about. All of our characters, Uhura, Sulu, Scotty, Bones, Kirk, they're all sacrificing their careers. They're giving it all up for the chance of saving Spock, of bringing him back. Well, I don't know if it's bringing him back or saving him. I don't know how we define that. The Genesis planet does weird things. But it flips a lot of those ideas around.
It's like, to me, it's like looking at the binoculars of the telescope through the other end. Yeah, where Wrath of Khan, gosh, maybe that was the intention.
It all seems so like pre-planned in this. If you look at it from a 2020 lens, like, oh, of course they planned this trilogy, but no, none of this was pre-planned.
Yeah, and then you get into 4, which was, gosh, these first 2 have been so heavy with death, life and death, and the universe at stake. Well, not the universe. The Earth is at stake in 4, and let's go on this lighthearted time travel romp. Which still only has the future of, humanity on Earth at stake. But still they underpin it with this romp. And but it comes back to, they actually sum up, they keep using the Genesis recording is still used. The recording of Kirk and Spock dying. I mean, it all still comes back to the crew being put on trial for Kirk and people for those sacrifices they made. That was more than just a literary illusion. Now it's going to run up against Federation Starfleet law, and of course only in Hollywood, or the 23rd century version of Hollywood, they go, okay, charges dismissed. You're also
and here's a ship for you. By the way, we're demoting you, but it's actually the job you really want.
Right.
And we just happen to have a brand new refit
right here
Enterprise here for you, ready to go. I love it. But it isn't it amazing that this idea of Voyage Home, it's connecting to ideas about conservation of the planet, of species, and that our whole fate relies on these whales. It's the needs of the many are completely dependent on the needs of the few. It's amazing how this theme plays out. So this is something you and I, Larry, have been going back and forth about this whole week, is what does this mean to you? The needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few, or the one. So I want to ask you, because I've been kind of deflecting this conversation because I want to have it here on Life Support. So what does it mean to you in this era, that in this crisis that we're going in? There's no Genesis device about to go off, but we're all struggling here in this crisis. What does the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few mean to you?
I might disagree there. We might have this. It might be a Genesis device on a much longer fuse, on a much longer ticker, but I think. Let me even duplicate that. Duplicate? Oh wow, that was
duplicate weird. Is it's like you just tech the tech here on Life Support.
I just tech the tech. No, let me just amplify that one though. I was about to say that you could say that the whole pandemic, the whole coronavirus pandemic, is the Genesis device on a slow motion timer. It's more than 30 seconds later. Poof. I mean, I'm skipping into Doomsday Machine there, but then people keep talking about the coronavirus pandemic and our reactions to it and our dealing with it, coping with it. That whole phenomenon is in itself a slow motion version of the whole climate crisis. And people saying that, people who are unable to look at data and numbers and what 99.9% of scientists say and have been saying for 30, 40 years, if that's too slow motion for you, the same thing is happening in real time almost here with the pandemic. again, it's not on a 30-second. We're not in a Hollywood, ticking clock 24-hour scenario here. But it's the time compression is now where more people get it.
Right.
And you still have reactions. You've got the doubting Thomas kind of reaction to things. That's the climate crisis situation, only compressed. And the same arguments follow, and people saying, okay, if you can't get if climate crisis is happening too slowly for you, although talk to the people in Miami and Venice, rising water or whatever. If that's too slow motion for you, it's all the same. We're not seeing the virus in operation, with our own eyes, but we're seeing the results. And we have a prescription here. We have people telling us what to do based on fact, observation, theory, testing. We have the ultimate testing and outcomes to get to with a cure or at least better treatments. But for right now, it's not like we have no playbook. And it's not like we haven't seen this before. And it's not like we haven't attacked pandemics that, thankfully, Ebola or H1N1 or SARS or MERS, we've been there and we bit the bullet before. But now we're back into Spanish flu days.
Yeah.
And we were supposedly a lot smarter than we were 100 years ago, but you wouldn't know it sometimes.
I mean, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I see where you're saying here. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about the themes here. There's a strong theme with the way we treat animals as well, tying into Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Part of the reason why, what's so scary about the coronavirus is it reminds me of how many viruses exist out there in the animal kingdom that we are completely oblivious to, we have no knowledge of, we've never been exposed to, because they exist out there with wild animals that usually don't interact with humans. But as humanity pushes further and further into the space of these wildlife, we're more likely to encounter their viruses. And as we poach and as we eat and bring those animals into our space, we're also more likely to encounter them. That's where a lot of these novel viruses come from. They come from us interacting with animals that we shouldn't really be interacting with. So there's a connection there between
and when you say novel viruses, you don't mean novels of viruses that were like made up for fiction.
No, that would be the macrophage and Star Trek Voyager. Not talking about that, although I love how much
novel virus is a term, is what I'm getting to.
Yeah, new viruses we haven't encountered before. They come from our interactions with animals that we shouldn't really be having. That's likely where the coronavirus came from, this COVID-19 virus. So there's a connection here to Star Trek 4 and conservation and the way we interact and respect and treat animals.
In the entire environment.
Yeah, the entire environment. Yeah.
It's almost like it's interlinked or something.
Libby had a great comment here. To me, it means you must consider others' safety, health, and needs. I'm a Methodist, and it compares to our saying, paraphrase, do all the good you can for all the people you can for as long as you can. I think that's a really great way to summarize this. And there was another great comment here.
Mention the chat, everybody. We've kind of like not been watching the chat. I've been scrolling back, and there are some awesome, including our one viewer from Twitch.
Yeah, our Twitch viewer, yes, you can watch last week's DS9 episode on Trekland, Larry Nemecek's Trekland, or the Psych Show. We have it archived. There's another comment here about shelter, the needs of the many, meaning sheltering in place.
That's the big one.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about that, Larry? Because that was a place where you kept going in our conversation.
Right. I mean, the first thought about the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few or the one. To me, right now, that strikes is how, and people talk about, we talk about the heroes and celebrating the heroes, and it keeps rippling down. People think of the medical frontline workers, and then it's like, well, now wait a minute. Let's think about all the grocery retailers and the people that still work at and pharmacy, drugstore people or chemists, as they say across the pond, But the people that are in retail that are still doing essential services that way, well, then back that up. How about the delivery people that
Yeah.
are supplying groceries and medicines, and the truck drivers, and the local delivery people, and even the restaurants that are, all of our local businesses that are struggling to survive, but they're making the sacrifice. I mean, they're being legally ordered in many cases, but people that are making the sacrifice. Bottom line, everybody at home doing that for taking a financial hit and suffering, but they're doing it in charge of the greater good, in charge of the needs of the many, because they want to eventually have an audience. They want to eventually have a customer base that's not decimated by a pandemic. I mean, it ultimately serves them. It's just really, really hard in the short term to think about the needs of the many. And most people, given facts, given the situation, and giving, again, versus climate science, which has left a lot of people only to look at real numbers. Until recently now, we're seeing polar bears on ice floes more and more. I mean, it's getting easier to see, tragically, but this is in real time and people get it. And so I think most, 60, 70, 80% of the polls around the world, people get it, and they're happy to support. They're not happy, but they know there's no choice. Right. But yet we still have a chunk of people that see it as it's a blight on their freedom.
Yeah.
Right? Don't tell me what I want to go out and kill myself. Damn it! You're always going to have that percentage. But that's basically what's at the crux of the needs of the many.
Yeah, and that's something I want to explore when you get into the counselor's log in just a moment here. But that is there. You mentioned it so well here that we're talking about the public good, and we're talking about public health, and we're talking about what is going to help all of us to survive, which doesn't just mean the coronavirus and reduce infection from coronavirus and deaths related to the coronavirus, but it also means preserving our healthcare system. That if our healthcare system is overrun by this, it is going to be obliterated. Our healthcare force, our resources are going to be obliterated. And then if you run into some kind of other health problem down the road, the resources might not be there to help you out. It's about preserving those resources. It's about trying to keep our way of life going, and meaning we all have to sacrifice in some way, whether it's sheltering at home or our essential workers or keeping society moving forward. There's so many pieces to that, and some of us are experiencing the needs of the one outweighing the needs of the many, where we might be prioritizing and trying to help someone who needs more help than others. I know there's a lot of people here who are going out of their way to try to get groceries for someone who might be in a high-risk category and can't do it themselves, or is going out of their way to try to help people in terms of healthcare, people in terms of supplies. There's so much people are doing to try to help people that they're very close to. So I want to explore this stuff. Can we open up the doors? And well, you don't open the doors in the counselor's log. Can we press the button on the pad for the counselor's log?
Let's do that. Yeah. Enough of this away review. I'm if my eyes are diverted, I'm busy catching up here on the chat because there's so many comments. People are somewhere between the movie plots and ramifications and what we've just been talking about. So you push the button on the counselor's log, and I'm going to catch this.
So there's a few themes here that leap out to me in terms of mental health and in terms of psychological science. So one of the things about the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few that I see from The Wrath of Khan is the connection to meaning and service and purpose. If we look at why does Spock do what he does in Wrath of Khan? Why does he give up his own life for the Enterprise? I mean, you can say, well, it kind of makes sense. He's like saving the ship, right? But I think it's something deeper than that. And it really gets to the existential thing about Starfleet. Starfleet is about, we have the mission statement right there. That's something that's so beautiful about Star Trek. We know exactly what it's about. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. That is Starfleet. That is Star Trek. That's the mission. And what we see throughout Wrath of Khan, from the Kobayashi Maru to the very end, is this theme about we serve each other, we help each other to promote this mission. And sometimes that means we have to make the ultimate sacrifice. But the mission is more important than any one person. And this is something in psychology that we would call a meaning or sense of purpose, connection to something that's larger than yourself. It seems to be the really important thing here is to be to believe that you are working towards something that is larger than yourself, and you're connected to people and advancing this thing that is going to live on after you're gone. It's really interesting, the research that's been done here is when people are connected to that meaning and purpose, they're able to do more than and be happier than they would otherwise. There's interesting research that's been done on janitors, that when janitors think they're just cleaning up and getting rid of garbage and keeping things running, they're not as flourishing in their lives as when they think that they are an essential part of this larger operation. Like if they're a janitor in a hospital, that they're helping people recover, they're saving lives, that I'm doing my part to serve this larger thing. And it's not just serving this larger thing and meaning, but for Spock, and I think for Kirk, and for everyone we see in The Voyage Home too, these beliefs and ideas become what's called a sacred belief, a sacred value. And we think of sacred, the word, and we think religion, but there's a lot of secular ideas that we all might find sacred. In America, freedom of speech is considered a sacred value, a sacred belief, that something that you should fight for, something that you can't compromise on, something that you can make the ultimate sacrifice to defend against. And sometimes sacred beliefs can be exploited for violence, and we see that often with terrorism. But sometimes they can be used for noble acts of heroism, as we see with Spock, that it is more important for me to protect my crew, to protect the mission, the Enterprise, than it is than my life. And we see that with Kirk being willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, his career, the Enterprise, to help the person he loves. And we see that again in Voyage Home. Like, let's give him the transparent aluminum formula, because this is way more important. It's way more important to protect the future. We have to make these sacrifices.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
I was going to say there's all kinds of layer. We think about the needs and the meaning needs. The one as about the Spock plot, right? And everyone's reaction. But there are all kinds of multiple. You started to touch on them there. But there are some multiple levels to different characters, and a lot of the guest characters. And we had a micro discussion on the other side of the room beforehand about the women characters here, and the guest Savick being very by the book and coming and having it be a growth for her. But Jillian in 4 starts off she has an arc too, and she's very possessive of the whales, and she needs to be because they need an advocate. But then when they're stolen, she doesn't know Kirk's holy mission, his sacred mission, and she's pissed about it. But then she's quickly on board when she gets, what it's all about. But it's almost like she sacrifices her possession, her not possession, but her ownership in a good way. What am I trying to say here? Her motherhood, her maternal instinct to protect the whales is sacrificed to see that she's still protecting them, but now she can protect a lot more whales that never were.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's like the awareness that comes in. It's easy to be sacrificing and self-sacrificial when you have a big picture, you have the facts.
Absolutely. And that also explains why some people are fighting to end sheltering and all of these things that might not be for the public good, because it ties back into your sacred beliefs and your identity. This is why stories are so powerful and ideas are so powerful, that when those things that we hold sacred are activated, we are willing to do whatever it takes to advance that. So many of us hold the value of safety and security to be a sacred value, sacred belief, and for many of us that's activated right now. But we can, if a story is bent in a way that it activates a different sacred value of freedom and of independence, people will become willing to put themselves at risk to go protest this. So this is why it's the story of how these things are told and the values that are activated are so important. And this is the role for all of our leaders in our local communities and states and in the larger government, to activate those core beliefs that everyone holds so sacred about you and your country and the larger story of how you fit into this. Because if you can activate that, you can get people to make these sacrifices for the greater good, like Spock does, or like Kirk does in Wrath of Khan, or as I'm blanking on her name, Larry. Is it Gilly in Jillian? There we gosh, I was close but so far off. In The Voyage Home, she leaves her family, she leaves the world that she knows, all for the sake of not only the whales but of all life in the future. I mean, that's massive. So if you can tap into people's ideals, the things that they find sacred, people can be willing to do anything, and that can be used for good and bad.
I was going to say, now the dark side of the coin here, there's another, until we were looking at this in examples in these three movies. There's a case here of someone making the ultimate sacrifice in service of a goal that they think is worth it.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly what we would think of as heroic. It's the act that starts the entire plot of Star Trek 3, where Valkyris, who you find out is Kruge's lover, she looks at the Genesis tape, and Kruge is like, well, then you know what you have. I mean, she basically takes the poison capsule, you know. He's like, well, you know what you've got to do. He doesn't say that, but it's all in the eyes, and she knows. And she's on the ship that he has to blow up because they're the witness to the Genesis tape. And you know. But there's a complete act of old school Klingon, you know, sacrifice there for the good of the project. Not exactly what we would think was in alignment with the greater sacred good, but she's doing her bit there. And when you see people, I'd like to know how much of this is motivated by, you know, money and ego and power, but some people intrinsically are rebelling against this greater good nonsense, because whether it's because they haven't been informed of, you know, going out to protest by that, but you're not proving anything to most people except how stupid you are, because you're doing the very thing that people are warning against. And then every time we hear a case of someone who intellectually protested, like they kept a big church open, or they went to one of these protests, and there have been lots of victims, and they always make it to the news. There have been a lot of victims that have died. You know, well, so it was a minister who defied, you know, and kept his 1,000-person congregation going, and then they find out later that he's, I mean, there have been news reports. I'm not thinking anything specific, but and then sadly, the case of the election in Wisconsin. Now they have now at least 20 cases of coronavirus to people that were standing in line to vote. Talk about sacrificing in a lot of people's minds there. Even though it not their idea, but they felt like they had to rise to what they disagreed with to go vote, and paid the price. I don't know if anyone's died from it yet, but certainly they've contracted. So. Just like these movies and the arcs and the wrinkles, there are a lot of ways this whole notion of for the good of the many versus the needs of the one is playing out. And
it kind of brings us to the question of, so during these times when we do have this impasse where people's values might be the what they find sacred might conflict, or what's been activated might conflict. So safety versus freedom. And in the case of the election that you just mentioned in Wisconsin, So how do we get over that? How do we work through that? And that kind of leads to negotiation and what happens with different negotiations. It seems like when sacred beliefs are activated, the way through, number one, you have to understand that it's been activated. And a lot of times we don't do that. So, for example, land seems to hold a lot of sacred value in people, like a farm that your family has owned for generations. And if a company comes along and says, we're going to give you all these millions of dollars for it, sometimes people will say, no, I'm not going to, there's no amount of money you can give me because my great 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 grandfather, started a farm here and all that kind of thing, right? Like this is sacred land to me. It's almost seen like a spit in the face when you offer money for someone to compromise on something they seem sacred. What seems to happen is you got to know that a sacred belief has been activated, and number two, you got to compromise on your own. So when someone is willing to compromise a bit on something that they find sacred, it makes it easier for the other person to compromise too. But I think the conflict that we're so having in 2020 is we just don't even understand each other and understand what beliefs have been activated and how they're playing out. There's so much work to be done, but I think Kirk in The Search for Spock, it's a beautiful example when Spock and when they're connecting at the end, and we see this play out in The Voyage Home too. Spock gets an awareness that Kirk has given up everything for him. He's given up everything that he has worked for his entire life to be there and save him, and so he's thinking about that, and that's kind of what we all have to do in these situations, is really understand where each other is coming from and how can we both work together and to solve some of these problems. It's really tough to do that, Larry. It is very difficult.
Well, as usual, we've got a great chat going on here in the comments, and our boy Boyd coming in from Twitch. He's really representing the platform.
Oh yeah.
His comment here at the end, and some people have kind of alluded to this also, says, now we're at a crossroads with COVID-19. A growing number are tired of the shelter-in-place order, even though they started off, sure, whatever. He says, we humans are naturally social beings and want to be around other people. Being at home for 5+ weeks is not easy. People are now willing to risk exposure just so they can resume some degree of normal life.
Yeah.
Which is, it's the natives are restless.
Yeah. Well,
like all these noble ideas, like Quark says in DS9 about, these humans and their creature comforts, they can be as damn liberal as anybody, but start taking away their replicators and their, whatever, and they can be as ornery as a Klingon. And
yeah, and I think one of the things here related to this comment is it gets back to like what we find meaningful. It's contributing to something larger than ourselves and also being connected to people who we really care about. I think both of those things have been really cut out of a lot of our lives. That our careers, our work, the things that we did that really gave our life meaning, a lot of those have been limited. Mm-hmm. And the people that we are connected to, that we really love and care about, connections with those people have been limited. And anyone who's struggling in that situation, what I want to tell you is when you are sheltering in place, you're not helpless. You are not, this is not a passive act that's being forced upon you. You are putting forward the needs of the many over the needs of the few or the one. In this case, you are engaged in this global act of altruism designed to stop this virus. You are telling this virus that you don't move if I don't move, so I'm going to stay put, so I'm going to save others' lives because maybe I don't have this virus, maybe I'm a carrier and I don't even know it, but you know what? The more I stay at home, the more I am increasing the chances of time, of giving our healthcare system time, the more I'm increasing the chances that other people are going to survive. So you are engaged in a massive act of altruism, the kind of which will lead to that 23rd century utopian future, I think.
It almost makes me, now I'm wondering, and of course we've got a great audience here that's chatting in, and I think they're all pretty much of a uniform mind, although people are looking around them and reporting on what they see, the fringes. But in the Greek, even within the realm of pop culture, and
Mm-hmm.
even in Comic-Con land, of all the franchises, people will still say that Star Trek's fandom is still the nicest, and I think that all comes of Gene Roddenberry and Iddick and infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. I mean, all the tenets of core Star Trek that attracted a fan base in the first place kind of lead to that, and even within pop culture, I'm just curious about everybody that we have on with us today. Watching, how unified are we, how frayed we are, but even within fandom, there are people that have, as we've gone through some phases, there's still a range of political beliefs within, say, Star Trek fandom. And I know a majority of the fandom is always surprised when what they might perceive as more conservative people who are gung-ho Star Trek fans, and maybe some of the tenets of Iddick, or maybe there's a blinder going on there. And these are all topics we're going to get into
Mm-hmm.
down the line on the show here, related today. But just in the reaction to the COVID crackdown and controversy, I'm just curious if any of our viewers and listeners have had experience where in our little idealistic Star Trek world, where today we're talking about sacrifice. It's not all just, we're talking about real world. Are there any in your Star Trek orbit of fandom and friends who are really chafing at the bit about this, and maybe not as willing to extend good old needs of the many as far as maybe most Star Trek fans intrinsically understand it? I'm just curious if anybody's got fellow fans that are, that are in that boat too, that are in that really impatient. Let's get out there. We've done it long enough. This has been enough sacrifice.
I mean, it's something I've struggled with, Larry. I some of my closest friends here, I'm dying to see them IRL in real life, and they've brought up the idea of what's that?
You emphasize dying so strongly.
Oh, well, I don't mean that. They're okay. We really want to see each other. We're very desperate to see each other, and we've brought up ideas of, well, what if we get together but we're many feet away? And that's kind of an easy one for me to say no to, because I have a 2-year-old who's highly predictable, who might not cooperate with that. She might get so excited that she might run up to them. Who knows? But we're at this point where some states are beginning to have a soft opening, and I think people are. It's very hard to keep going here, and I have to keep reminding myself that I'm not moving forward right now. I'm gonna stay put in this situation, and I've got the privilege to be able to do that. Some people who are essential workers don't. But I'm feeling that tension myself. Of this is a point at which I want to start putting my needs forward. I want to reconnect with the people I really care about. It's hard. This is a very hard point in this crisis.
Yeah, I'm just reading some more of some more of our chats. It got me back to when I first started thinking about what I could do to help. I mean, in my entrepreneur circle, we were very much about, people were like everyone. People are worried about their businesses, their income. We've seen different governments around the world, our American government, and state to state, the reaction is slightly different. But we've seen people at least try to express an awareness of helping people to do the right thing, even though no one's whole in this. But really, I was thinking about audiences out there, and like the audience, and some of the reasoning that led you and I to doing life support here. I'm coming to the point where I thought there were 3 audiences out here in a modern sense. So one, we've got people who are at home, and somehow, and this has even been a channel of creativity to channel some of this restlessness. People who are at home and they're still working. Either they were at home, they work at home anyway, like I do, or they were people who were somehow able to pivot and use technology, use our communication devices, which I keep saying over and over. If this had been 10, 15 years ago, even, we would not be maybe as socially adjusted to doing this, thanks to our technology. So yay on that. But people who are at home and working for now and still have at least the stress of the disease and the pandemic is not compounded by the stress of financial situation and comfort. Then we've got people that are home that don't want to be at home, and they've lost income.
Yeah.
And they've got no way to pivot. And
Yep.
they're in a stress from the pandemic and their financial situation. And then we've got the people who are, quote unquote, lucky enough to be not at home, and they are going out, whether they're doctors and nurses, or they're truck drivers, or they're delivery and grocery stockers, or they're working in nursing homes, or they're correctional officers working in jails, some of the hot spots, the meat packing plants. My God,
Yep.
some of the hot spots we've got going. Those people who are lucky enough to have their job and lucky enough to be going into the normal world, which is not normal.
Yeah.
And they know at a gut level whether they've got their hands on sick people in a hospital, or they're bumping into people 6 inches away at a meat plant, or whatever, that they're very much on the front line in their own way, and they're risking it very viscerally. It's like, gosh, I wish I could be at home
Yeah.
doing thing by Zoom, but
Yeah.
they can't be. It's like it feels like we've got three major fields of stress and worry and concern here. And so everything that I was doing was trying to address all of those, right?
Mhm.
And maybe the people who are stuck at home, some in a little more comfort than others, but everybody's stressed in their own way, could deal with live events. And the folks who are out there, who are, again, air quote, lucky, to be out in it and working, can come home and watch things. Some of the programs and things I'm doing, they're live, and I mean they're recorded, like life support's recorded. But to me, it kind of distilled down to those three groups. So what do you think? And maybe folks out here too in the chat.
Yeah, no, Rebecca said people who are key workers who would much rather be home and safe. And Dan said, I heard there's people who view the lockdown as a holiday. It's to me.
Well, Jared also said there are a lot of people, the people who are chafing about being home, and somebody said people keep just generically saying people are social animals. There are a lot of people that are not social animals.
Yeah.
The introverts, Mr. Real Doctor. There are a lot of people who are introverts and feel totally at home right now. And even to the point of saying, all you folks locked down and have the discomfort you feel, this is the reverse of the introverts who are forced to go out and be social.
Yeah, there's another angle to this. I made a video this week about Zoom memes and me reacting to them. And in my research for that, one of the things that I was, a perspective I really liked was some of the frustration that people who are, a term that I really like called neurotypical. So people who tend to have a brain that's wired the way most people's brains are. Many of them are really...
Neurotypical is what the normally non-PC world calls normal.
Right. Which I don't really like that word, because what does that mean? But so I'm going to use a word that's probably a lot more technical that also people might not know what it means, which is neurotypical. But a lot of the frustrations that people who are on Zoom experience, like, who am I supposed to look at? The frustration, the boredom, the distraction, the fatigue, that in some ways replicates the experience that people who are on the autism spectrum experience in regular life, trying to navigate social situations. So there's a lot of empathy that we can develop for some of the frustrations that we might have here. And I think that also applies to people who are more introverted or people who are more extroverted, is if you're very extroverted and you're frustrated in this situation, that probably in some ways replicates the experience that some people who are more introverted might experience in these open-ended social situations. So I think there's so much room for us to have compassion and empathy and understanding for people who are different than us based upon the experience we're going through right now. Like if you're really frustrated by Zoom meetings, like you now have a very good understanding of what it might be like to be on the autism spectrum and navigate an unstructured social situation. Or if you're very frustrated by the feeling of being at your home, if you really are craving and desiring more social attention, well, you now kind of understand how overwhelming it can be to be in a social situation and craving the comfort of your home if you're much more introverted. So there's massive room for compassion and understanding if we allow ourselves to really understand those things more and have more conversations like this that we're having.
Yeah, and again, everybody apologize. My eyes slitting off. I'm not ignoring Ali. I'm just trying to keep up with the chat here.
This is Scott. I'm so glad you enjoyed the meme video. It is hard to do the live, to do the so if our eyes go off camera, it's because we're trying to keep up with the comments. I love all the comments. DJ, welcome. You're new here. I'm glad to have you here. We got some introverts raising their hand. Scott is also raising his hand on that.
It reminded Sean here. Hey, Sean. Doug Drexler saying he knows he'd be fine in isolation on a trip to Mars. Yeah.
You know what's funny about that, Sean, is my whole life I've always wanted to be an astronaut. And then when I was a teenager or younger than that, someone told me, "Oh, you don't have good eyesight. You can't be an astronaut. It's not possible." I don't know if that's true or not. But I sort of, I did not pursue that as a career path. The closest I got is I did a 1-year internship at NASA in a psychology lab, probably one of my favorite experiences in my life. However, the reason I raised that is it's clear to me that I am not built to be an astronaut. This experience has revealed to me that I am not built for living long-term in an isolated environment. It is just not, no thanks. I'm good. I think I'm happy to be surface side.
Okay, well, so I should like take back all the personal recommendations I was going to write on your behalf. Okay, I guess I'll
no. Send those in. I maybe one day I can work with astronauts. That'd be cool. I think that's my role in I just want to be a counselor, I guess.
I didn't know you'd done a 1-year internship in the psych lab at NASA. That's interesting.
Yeah. I worked with the folks who helped redesign the space shuttle cockpit in 2000. So they're trying to redesign the interfaces to reduce error and make it much easier for the astronauts to see the information that they need. My boss told me, I said, what's the biggest thing you've learned from all of your research? And he said, well, the easiest way to get people's attention is to put black font on a white background. That is I was like, that is the biggest thing you've learned. And he's like, yeah, just remember that whenever you're making slides or information, like black on white, easiest way to pick up people's attention.
Forget the red. Forget all the googie emojis. Yeah. So where are we? How's the counselor's log doing? Are we?
I think we should close it up. We've had a very long counselor's log. I think it's time to close that up. Why don't we head into the K3 factor, Larry?
Oh, I knew you were going to get to the K3 factor. I've got a great one for the K3 factor. So the K3 factor, guys, is the deep cut for the original series, because we first started to thought of our life support live here, and our format in our our briefing room, away mission, counselor's log format. And I hate to break it to you again, but my doctor of Trekology does not extend to quite the scope that Ali's actual PhD does. He's the real doctor, in other words. But I want to make sure I could bring to the conversation here my half of the show. And so as we were scoping around, there's not a lot of medical iconography from the original series beyond, the Red Cross patch that Chapel and the nurses wear, or the shape of a hypo, say, or something, or the shape of a med scanner, which are kind of clunky to use. But it's a little known fact that on the biomedical scan, there's blood, all the famous floaty, the pulsing pulse and respiration and the temperature scale and all that. But there's one of the 6 vertical scales mentioned, labeled K3 indicator, and actually gets called out in dialogue once. Chapel says something about, "Oh, doctor, his K3 indicator is falling," meaning a measure of brain activity. It's one of the few cases besides psychotricorder that happens, that goes to. So the K3 factor here, guys, is where the real
Oh
Are we there?
no,
Yay, we're
Larry,
there.
we got you. We got you.
We got
We
you.
got some subspace interference for a moment, but we're
Some
back on.
some subskypal interference is what that is. No, so K3 factor is the one thing we can cling to from the original series. So here's my for our theme here of sacrifice, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one of the few. I hinted at it earlier, but in making the Wrath of Khan, the clock is ticking. People, all eyeballs are on this, recovering from financially as a situation, recovering from. Are we still connected?
We're still connected. I hear you.
Oh, okay. I seem like I'm maybe frozen on the picture, but I'm just
We're
checking.
good.
So, okay. Bottom line here, Wrath of Khan is going to be made. Nick Meyer comes in, not invested at all at Star Trek. He has to do some research to get up on the characters, but he brings a fresh eye. He sits down, he sees the 5, yes, count them, 5 different stories and scripts that have been commissioned and paid for, hopefully in service to this movie. None of them really click. They're starting to get desperate. Harv Bennett is starting to get desperate. Nick Meyer just goes home, takes the 5 scripts, pulls the best elements out of all of them, and just says, here, damn it. He's hired to be a director. He is not hired to be a writer. Mm-hmm. Although he's obviously wrote 7% Solution. He comes back, he goes, here, bang. The script he throws down is 95% of what we see on screen as the final product. Whether by his own Paramount saying, okay, but we're not paying you for a writing credit, the Writers Guild having rules about all these people and their submissions and their elements being used in the final product, one of them finally does get screen credit. But through all of that, does Nick Meyer say, nope, damn it, I'm not proceeding with this project until I get full credit for the script? No. He goes, fine, let's just get it done. I'll direct the damn thing. So here's Nick Meyer in service of the greater product, totally willing to subvert his writing credit. Without his script, there would be no Wrath of Khan. Mm-hmm. There would be no project, much less our memory of it. So there's a case in real life, one putting the good of the many ahead of the good of the few or the one, and waiting years before people really got the full story, 10, 20 years before people really got the real story. There's that statute of limitations in Hollywood, same thing in politics, where all the, you want to call it a dirty story or dirty linen, or sometimes we just might call it the truth. But, people, I'm on my deathbed, I'm writing my tell-all book. Well, maybe those are dressed up a little bit, but there's this cycle where people are willing to talk about the unpopular or the uncomfortable, but it was real life. And eventually it comes out. It's just not in the moment when it can be manipulated for PR. But here's a case of Nick Meyer totally pulling one for the good of the many and the few, or the good of the many versus the good of the one, his own ego and his own career. He had enough. He didn't need it.
I love that. I had no idea about that. I had no idea at all. There's always these new elements of Trek lore that I learn from you, Larry, every time we do one of these. So I really appreciate that.
Well, gosh, Ali, you should listen to the Trek Files.
I should.
Or get into Portal.
What's so cool about that fact too is it gets at how film and TV is made. There's no one person that makes any of these projects possible. Film and TV is such a product of so many people putting the needs of the project ahead of their own. Like whether it's the cast, the talent on screen, like the amount of hours a day that they have to spend learning their lines, practicing one scene over and over and over again, to craft services who are this invisible force that need to beam in, have feed and nourish hundreds of people and like beam out, like not cause any problems, to the gaffers, to people who are lighting sets, operating the cameras. If you've ever been on a set, it is, as Larry, you and I both have in very different situations, I might add, but it's a massive team. Like what I find so beautiful about every production is it is like a crew, quite literally a starship crew coming together. Everyone has their job and their role, and they all, like an orchestra, have to work perfectly together to create this product. So the fact that Nick Meyer was like, let's make the thing. I don't need this credit. Let's get it done. That's an example of what the best crews, when they come together, both in Star Trek and as well as in making Star Trek. That's a beautiful example of how it gets done. Is people putting the needs of the project ahead of their own and working together to get it going.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat again, and Johannes, who's joining us from Finland, and he's been a Portales in the past, and he's a big researcher, archivist in all things NASA and real space flight. We're talking here; it's the exact same thing. The astronauts get all the front credit, just like stars in production. It's that huge NASA and vendor support team behind every space mission or every long-term project.
Yeah,
the astronauts. The glory kids, the stars of the show that depend on directors, writers, craft service, the gaffers. I mean, everybody behind them to make them look good, but also they look good because the mission goes well. And when it doesn't look good, like Apollo 13, they're the ones that save their.
Yeah, exactly. There's
also the capacity for reinvention on the fly. And if we have a rational grounding, even when things go, oh, take this as a metaphor. Maybe you can use it in your career, Ali. When things go wrong, if we have a basis in fact and rationality, we can still course correct to do the right thing, or to at least salvage the best options out of a situation.
Yeah.
Right? Depending on how good even when things don't go by the book.
Johannes, I'd love your take if you've read An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, I believe is the name of the book. It was a memoir. I'm blanking on the name of the astronaut right now, but he goes into large detail about how it's a large team effort. Everything that happens in space, it's everyone working together to make it happen. And when astronauts return to Earth, their main job is to train other astronauts and to work together to support them. So it's a beautiful example of how real spaceflight actually works, and in many ways, I think it's related to how Star Trek works. These large teams coming together. Larry, I've got a very quick away mission for us today.
Okay.
Let's hop into the away mission briefing. I don't know, whatever it's going to be. So away mission, this is where there is a takeaway that you can apply to your life right now in navigating this uncertain time. And there's a lot of exercises here that can help people to get connected with meaning and purpose. And we know when people are burnt out, they're really struggling. One of the things that we try to do is help people to reconnect with what is meaningful in their life. And there's this idea, let me see if I can pull it up, from Viktor Frankl. The Man's Search for Meaning is like the required text when it comes to this. I feel like now every week I'm giving people like book assignments too. Last week it was Sapiens. This week it's Man's Search for Meaning. But there's
books, my boy, books.
Yes, more books. We all need more books. But there's a quote, not from Man's Search for Meaning, but from another psychologist who talks about meaning, where he says crises are a chance for people to give up dead wood, toxic habits or patterns, and explore who they truly are and what really matters in life. And so this is the away mission I have for everyone, is to think about, what would you blow up the Enterprise for? As without any people inside, like Kirk does in The Search for Spock. When he blows up the Enterprise and everything that led him to that moment, he is sacrificing his career, the things he's worked for, everything he's done from the original series to the motion picture to now. The thing he loved so much, the ship, the Enterprise, he's blowing it all up because of his love for his friend. What is it in your life that is worth so much, that means so much to you, that you would blow up the Enterprise? You know, it's not just the big things like our careers and all of that, but it can be the small things too, like who it is around you in the community, your family, walking your dog. What are the things that mean so much to you that you would give up so much for them? So to think about that, and then how can you serve those things right now? whether it's the people in your life that you really care about, how can you serve them right now? This was something that this life support is very meaningful to me, and it's why we launched it, Larry, is we thought, okay, these things that you and I love, can we use this in a way to help people? Can we use it to help each other, to start these important conversations? So what is it that you would blow up the enterprise for, and how can you serve that right now?
You're asking me.
Yeah, I'm asking everyone.
Okay.
Or I'm encouraging everyone
It's
to think about that.
Because I hated that moment in Star Trek 3.
Oh, really?
Because I said, no, this is just a cinematic excuse. You've always saved the Enterprise. You just want something for a big screen moment. So they hate that model. So they're going to get rid of it. They're going to build a new model. No, I was very meta angry at that moment. So I didn't see it as a wonderful sacrifice that had all this meaning at all. I was just like, oh, you're too lazy to get the plot resolved without that big cinematic. Ooh, we killed Spock in 2. We're going to kill the Enterprise in this one. Yeah. Every movie, we got to kill something new. So yeah,
it's so I could definitely see that perspective. So more metaphorically for you, Larry, then I guess to think about like,
here's where my mind is going to. I think Picard's line about the line must be drawn here, no farther.
Yeah,
we love to parody that line, but he's talking about fighting the Borg.
Yeah,
and of course, her advice back at him is like, this is a chance. This is a time you're going to do you're going to fight the better fight by letting go and not holding fast. But then in Insurrection, he does pull a pre-Picard series. People are forgetting this, that the Picard series is all about him going rogue when he had to.
Yeah.
Do what he thought was right. Talk about the good of the many, and the whole synth ban and Data's memory and all of that. The good of the. But he did the same thing in Insurrection. He put his career on the line and went rogue, took his pips off. They love that metaphor. Mm-hmm. I'm taking the pips off, y'all. This is off the books. I'm going rogue to go save the Baku.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, I mean, there's talk about other cases of self-sacrifice in Star Trek, but and there's episodic cases too. So, I don't know. I'm gonna dwell on this for real.
Yeah, that's not a quick answer thing. But it's, if you're trying to tap into the needs of the many for yourself, think about that. Like, what is it that you would give up your career in Starfleet for? What is it that what are the things that really matter to you that you would sacrifice so much for? And how can you stay connected to those things right now? How can you serve these things that are gonna live on long and prosper after we might be gone?
Hopefully, right. Things, I don't know, like if maybe your spouse or significant other has to make a huge career move, and you and you give up part of what you're doing to be able to, sometimes it's not necessarily a crisis. Sometimes it's more aspirational, or someone in your workplace that is being, or someone in school is being bullied, and you stand up for them. And then you take the slings and arrows.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So you're in your mind, you're trying to stand up for the needs of the few or the one there, versus maybe the many. Or you're a person I'm watching on the news. You're a person who's working in a meatpacking plant, and the owners are not taking good care of the workers. And someone stands up and exposes that to the media to get the word out because it's being covered up.
Yep.
Right. Somebody pulls a Norma Ray, or they pull a Brockovich.
Erin Brockovich, yep.
Erin Brockovich. They pull, it's the whistleblower that pulls it at risk to themselves to support either their workmates or even something greater, like, I don't know, the whole country.
Right. So right. Dan mentioned that not only the Enterprise, but also David killed off in Star Trek 3, both close aspects to Kirk, and the decision to destroy the Enterprise could be seen as him being emotionally inflicted by the death of his own son. My God, Bones, what have I done? What you always do, turn death into... Oh gosh, Larry, what's the line? Turn death into a
chance to live. Something like that.
Gosh, I love that moment, Larry. You know what though? I had the pleasure of seeing those back to back on VHS. That's the way I experienced those. So it kind of hit me in a very different way. So with that, I think we want to open up the hailing frequencies here, and
Yeah.
we want to talk to folks. If you want to join us on Mission Log Live, send us a message at Life Support Host on Skype, and we'd love to get you on the show. We'd love to see your comments. We'd love to see you. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see your comments. And while we're also waiting for those to come in, Larry, next week we need to get a vote going on our Facebook group. That is how we decided to do this. We had a poll. So where can people find our poll for next week's episode?
So the poll is on it's on the Life Support. Yes, you have to join the Facebook page, Life Support Live, and we'll put the poll up. We had 3 or 4 answers, but I designed it where people can offer their own options.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have a groundswell, or maybe we'll have something to offer as a given option in coming weeks. But yes, we had a poll this week, and it wasn't a runaway. It was 16 here and 12 or 13 over here. But this week's theme, the needs of the many, Barkley and anxiety is another. We've had kind of broad topics here. That's not to negate the fact that we can focus on a character or a species or a planet. I mean, we can take any example out of Star Trek and have fun with it, and I think pull lessons, a new way of looking at things. And then maybe what I love about Star Trek is it's still popular because people obviously find something worthwhile in it. We're not talking about My Mother the Car here, or something or Me and the Chimp. I mean, we're talking about something that intrinsically, organically has kept. No one's astroturf Star Trek for 54 years. No one paid people to like it for years, right?
Yeah.
So people are still finding the good. There's still new being made based on the original. So those are the kinds of things that if it's that alive for people in their lives, then I think it's perfect for us to mine today. Besides, we love the trivia and the backgrounding and all that, but what comes out of the writing, I said before, I love doing Life Support Live because for once I feel like I get to talk about all those core values of Star Trek that when we get off on the behind the scenes or the canon, the background trivia, all that where I've kind of lived, because it's okay. And I feel good about this because I feel like I'm getting back to the roots of what Trek is that I kind of like, well, yeah, and bypassed years ago. So, but yeah, so all of those are there. Go to the original question. I know. Go to our Life Support Live page and we'll vote. I'll bring back the Barkley.
I think Barkley should be back. I think Voyager and
Isolation and Loneliness.
The other one, Larry, I know you and I are itching to this, and we keep touching it here and there. This issue of fandom.
Social distance.
Yeah. Ooh. Do we have a recommendation? Of social.
Yeah, we've had comments about fandom and social distancing right now in the comments. But yes. All that, and you know what? I even hesitate to. We've talked about different aspects within just a broad fandom, online etiquette and bullying and gatekeeping and all kinds of things within fandom. So we'll start there. We'll see. We can break down.
And we'd love to take your requests too. If there's, there's so much to explore. I'd love to get to Star Trek Enterprise at some point. Star Trek Discovery. There's so many aspects to this, and there's so many directions to go into. With all of that, but if anyone wants to join us.
So here's the thing, guys. We're a little worried about our Skype connection for dialing in.
Yeah.
The first week get in. So you can, if you go to Life Support Host and join us and find us, can't people text us? That's what you were saying. You want people to text and say, I'm in there. So in case you can't break right through, we can reach out from our side.
Yeah, and if anyone is trying to reach us and is unable to, please comment and let us know. This is something that we've been wondering about if people are able to get through. So if you can't get through, please do let us know, and we will we'll work to ameliorate the situation. Now I'm making up words. I don't know.
Oh no. That was wasn't she like a social worker in the 1890s? Ameliorate? No, okay. While people are doing that, just so
Oh,
many. We've
Dan
had
says, I've tried but no reply. Um, Dan, can you give us your can you just comment with what your Skype name
Skype.
is, and we'll send you a request. Hopefully, we can get you on.
Well, and meanwhile, the message thread is just running away with good stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
So one point, Johannes said something about the fuel low light, which came in Apollo 11, almost could have killed the first landing, when Neil had to find a good space to land. He said they intentionally only made it a silent flashing light and didn't attach an audio alarm because they didn't want to freak even the well-trained astronauts out we've got other people. So, and I'm going to apologize on pronunciation, but bad white English would be divjot. So I'm not sure how Mr. Batra here how to pronounce it, but he says he's currently in high school pursuing commerce for his bachelor's should he pick psychology, as he wants to become an entrepreneur and understand the people around it. Will it help in that?
That's a really great question, and it can definitely help you in that. I would say if you're pursuing business, what you might want to do is pursue business as the primary degree, because in psychology, you don't get a lot of training in the business aspects of how to run a business. You're not going to get that in psychology. You will get the human behavioral aspect to it, how people think, all of those kind of things. But maybe take some of those classes on the side. If you can minor in it, get intro psych and get social psych, probably, definitely, and then talk to those professors and ask them more questions about how do I get more experience with business psychology. There's a whole field of psychology called IO psychology, which is much more about how teams work together. But then there's also consumer psychology, which is more about like messaging and advertising. So there's a lot of areas to explore. I would say if you want to be an entrepreneur, pursue business, take some psychology on the side, talk to those professors, and see how you can find out more.
That would be great. A lot of cases, so Sean's saying, reminding me, as we saw in The Right Stuff, when they built the first space capsule, the Mercury capsule, they didn't have a window in it until the astronauts said, "Where's the window?" And that seems like insane today, but talking about the human factor there. We think Rebecca's saying the book we mentioned, Astronaut's Guide to Earth, is Chris Hadfield?
Yeah, Chris Hadfield, that's the one.
There we go.
Dan, I am messaging you now. Let's see if this goes through. Dan just sent his...
The only show that reaches out to its viewers from... yeah. And I'm madly scanning this. I think I'm going backwards somehow here.
Yeah, there's Rose has been thank you, Rose, for all of your comments. Your comments have really been fantastic. Mentioning Deep Space Nine season 7 episodes 25, 26, What We Left Behind. So much happened in that finale. There's so much we could explore. Gosh, we would if you let me, Rose, I will talk all day about Deep Space Nine with you. But yeah, fantastic episode. Dan, let me know if you're seeing those messages. It says on our end, waiting for Dan to accept invitation. Hopefully I did not message the wrong Dan, but we will see. This is a live show, completely live and raw.
Well, it wouldn't be. We've had. I love the interaction that we've had here for everybody coming in. And Boyd on Twitch is still with us. He's, messaging in. Yay! Someday our Twitch audience is going to double, and it will be incredible. Hey, here's one. From YouTube, Pan con queso me gusta. Just says well, I don't know where you're coming from exactly with this. Just does money equal love, which is a little out of the.
Well, if I had to summarize what we know about the psychology of money, it's important up to a point. It does give you it does give happiness up to a point where you are able to pay for the essentials that you need. After that, there's some diminishing returns on more money equaling more happiness. But what we know is money also buys you better healthcare, better food, things that we know are important for long-term happiness. So does money equal love? Money does equal stability, access, care to a degree
in our system.
In our system, in the way
Not,
society works right now. Yeah.
Yeah, in our not in a, yeah. Here's I'm scrolling backwards. I wanted to give a shout out to Libby Smith here. She wrote in and said she's not in a Trek specific. When we were talking about is anyone in your Trek circle or your sci-fi circle coming up with the opinion if it's time to reopen, and they think enough's enough. And their spectrum on the self-sacrificing stay at home is about done. And she said she's not in a Trek specific group right now, but she hasn't encountered anybody risking it. Yes, we want to see each other in person in a bad way, but we don't want to risk each other's safety, which is what everyone's more or less echoing here. But she's commenting all the I was curious about this, and a lot of the conventions in our orbit here, in our sci-fi and Trek orbit, a lot of the big event conventions are going down one by one, and some of them are tied up in legalese, in force majeure, and all that kind of thing, penalty phases, and they don't want to go bankrupt to some venue that's holding them onto it until they're governmentally ordered that they can't meet. But for the most part, so many of them are going away, and a lot of them are getting creative and having virtual replacements. That's where we started. This originally began as a panel. Life support began as a panel for WonderCon that went away, and we decided to keep it alive. So that's it. We're getting back to what you're talking about, the Zoom meetings. That's we will be different coming out of this. I talked about this on Trekland Tuesdays Live this week, is that we will be different about this. Hopefully we take away, and the pandemic and responses ripped the Band-Aid off for things good and bad socially, right? We're finding all the weak spots in our economy and social structure that have been ripped raw by this. And so many things that we care about are absolutely meaningless now in the middle of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And it's a great equalizer. The virus does not care about class or previous income or what your job is, whether you're a brain surgeon or you're a delivery kid bringing, meals out to people. You're keeping people alive, and you're keeping a restaurant alive, and hopefully you're staying alive, and hopefully you're being taken care of for your own risk. I mean, looking at society in so many different ways that way, and also coming out of it will be how we deal with this virtual. Virtual won't just be for businesses and at-home coaches and things. With so much of the population exposed to this, and people maybe finding their discomfort factor and either learning from it or not learning from it. But anyway, we're going to be a different society after this, and it'll be interesting to see on conventions and big events. And does any of this stick and go forward? And does it alter the way we look at live events, or do we cherish our live moments now much more?
Larry, I'm going to bring in our guest today, our guest caller.
Did we make it?
We made it. Yeah. Would you mind introducing yourself? We don't hear you. Hopefully you are not. Okay, let's try again. Dan, can you try again? You might be muted on your end. We see you. We just don't hear you.
He's not muted on our end.
He's not muted on our end. Dan, are you muted on your end?
He's coming from the UK, so.
We can't hear you. Hopefully we'll get you soon here.
I'd just like to know what Skype's problem is.
Dan, we see you. We just can't hear you right now. But we see you really well.
Dan's a resourceful guy. Maybe you can just write things out and hold them up.
I know, that would be.
I said Norma Ray a while ago. Can you, or what's his name? the teenage love story movie where they hold up the signs.
Dan, I'm gonna hang up on you and call you back in. Let's see if that solves things. Sounds like you're hearing us, so that's half of the problem right there. Is working. Okay, I'm gonna pull you back in, Dan. I'll call you right back. This, ladies and gentlemen, and all people, is the lovely. Oh, great! And I've now hung up on Larry as well. That is something apparently I keep doing. Oh, the journey that is a live show when you are running it yourself. Larry, I hung up on you as
I've called back in.
We hear you. We don't see you yet, but we will see you momentarily. And I'm trying to call back.
I see. It's Dan Leckie. Oh, I was thinking Dan.
Dan, can you try talking? Can we hear you? Can't hear you. So this is fun. We are hearing Larry, but we don't see Larry. We are seeing Dan, but we don't hear Dan. You gotta love technology. They both bring balance to the force, not to cross the streams over, but that is what's happening.
Oh wait, I called life support, not life support host.
Oh, I wonder if that's our. Yeah, Larry, we hear you, but we don't see you, and
right.
And Dan, we see you, but we don't hear you. My goodness, things are. Oh no, and we lost Dan. This is such an adventure, folks.
Are you still hearing me?
I hear you. I just
they were pushing the envelope. I just got to tighten my annular confinement beam here.
Yeah. Okay, Dan, you're back. Can we hear you?
I tell you what, I'll talk and Dan can move his mouth.
Dan, it's saying on my end that you are not muted. I can intentionally mute you and unmute you. It doesn't seem to be. Doesn't seem to be making a difference here. Not sure what's happening. Oh, Dan, I'm so bummed this is not working. And Larry, we still don't see you.
I think you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah.
That's the prettiest blue Skype icon. I picked it out just for the show.
It's very well lit. It is a nice thing there.
I'm sure the Skype company will be. I'm sure Microsoft is just thrilled with our depiction. It's so strange.
Well, let me see if there's anything new in the comments. Let's see. Oh, and we're bringing Dan.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Dan,
what happened?
I hear you. However,
he simply does not believe his ears. Okay.
Dan, try again.
Can you hear?
I hear you. Yes. I hear you, Dad. So we're still working on getting visual back on Larry, but thanks for joining us on Life Support Live. How are you holding up today? Oh no, Dad. I heard you and now I don't.
I heard him and now I don't. And I'm invisible.
Oh no, Dad, I don't know what happened. It was working so well. And then as soon as I asked you a question, I stopped hearing you. Ladies and gentlemen, folks, people of all ages and backgrounds, we're having a lot of good technical fun here. I hope people are getting a kick out of enjoying Larry and I trying to make a live show happen. And really just dropping the ball on the tech side here.
Are you okay?
Houston, we do indeed have a problem here today. Huh. Larry, are you still with us?
Are you still hearing me?
I'm hearing you. Yeah. Oh, I
on.
see you. Okay. So
So I called back on. Okay, we'll work all this
okay,
out.
so
We
I
called
see
back.
you.
Yeah.
Dan, can you hear us? Can you see us? And of course, we see Dan, but we don't hear Dan. This is oh, Dan, I am so bummed. I don't know what's going on here. We heard you for a brief moment before, and now we don't. Okay, Dan, we're gonna try to get you on next week. Let's make that happen.
We've got the.
We'll figure something out, or maybe we'll go back in time. We'll go around the sun. We'll get back to this point in time. We'll fix this. Maybe having some transparent aluminum in house might help us solve this.
Are we talking transparent aluminum? Or are we talking Superman 1970? Yeah.
We might need a Superman. I'm just gonna hello computer and maybe have Siri fix this whole situation. So hopefully we'll see you next time, Dan. I'm so sorry about that, but really appreciate you being here. Larry, it has been.
Yeah, Dan, the brilliant comment you were going to make, leave it in the chat box.
Yes, please do. So, Larry, this has been a wonderful journey of...
Yeah, seriously, it actually has. We've pushed the envelope here a little bit at the end again, but don't let that take away from... It's been a wonderful session today, Doctor.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. What I've really been enjoying is how different each conversation has been week to week, and maybe we should end this one while we're ahead before I hear my daughter starting to get fussy. So we are losing structural integrity very quickly. So maybe we should warp out of here while we still can. Larry, where can people find you? Where can people find more of Trekland this week?
Oh, well, everything is at LarryNemecek.com. And at Larry Nemecek on Twitter. Larry Nemecek's Trekland is, if you're watching us live right now on Facebook, that's probably where you are if you're not on Ali's panel. But a lot of my folks are watching there. But if you're new, please go over and find my Facebook, Larry Nemecek's Trekland. And Larry Nemecek on Twitter. It's the Larry Nemecek's Trekland is the same thing on Instagram also as well. And if I got out of the way, Portal 47 back there is a great way that I have deep divers. It's my business that we have now, and we have guests and wonderful things. We have a mini con all year long on virtual fandom. We were doing it 5 years ago before all these rookies jumped in. all these pandemic newbies. So anyway, but that's where we are, and yeah, please engage me on Twitter and everywhere like that. There. How about you, Dr. Ali, real Dr. Ali?
I am in similar places, the interwebs. So you can find me on the Psych Show YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Ali Mattu, ALIMATTU, and on Facebook at the Psych Show as well. And I'm working on, this past week I've kind of been asking people what is the biggest stressor they're dealing with in terms of their mental health, like what is the biggest struggle they have, because what I've found is like everything's changed in this crisis, and the biggest responses I've received are motivation, sleep, and uncertainty seem to be the things that people are really struggling with. So I'm working on a video that's gonna tackle sleep during the pandemic and this crisis, and how to help people out. So if there's anything you want to see me make, if there's a challenge that you're experiencing, let me know in the comments, and I'm doing my best to work through these comments and make content that is helpful for you right now. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, you have a wide practice, Doctor. I saw Anthony Rapp jumped in. And,
he did. He did. And
fellow scientist,
real life Starfleet officer, Anthony Rapp commented too, and I mean, we're all struggling with these issues, and what I've been so surprised by, not surprised, but really humbled by, is how all of us seem to be struggling with such similar things right now. The world is united not only in trying to stop this, but in the way we're struggling with it too. Mm-hmm. And look, my daughter just walked over and handed me this. I thank you, sweetie. Thank you for giving me that. So odd brand.
So on brand, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sweetie.
I was going to say I wanted to invite people also. I totally forgot. So every week on Tuesdays we have Trekland Tuesdays live with a topic and interaction somewhat like this. On my right here on my Facebook page at 1 Pacific, so 4 Eastern. And then on Fridays we started a little book meetup group called Nonfiction Fridays. So if you are a fan, or if you're a new fan and you want to hear about some of the foundation stones of Star Trek, taught by humans, not by a book. If you're new here with our stream, please join us. That's a Zoom meeting, but there's a Facebook page called Nonfiction Friday that has the Zoom link and the password. Okay, there she is. I know. Oops, did I out her? Did you want to keep it all a celebrity child secret here? Shelter her from the storm of celebrityhood.
Well, now we're getting a plant. Okay, so it's show and tell hour now. Life support is ending, and my daughter's show and tell is beginning. So with that, we should probably wrap things up. And everyone, we'll see you. We'll see you next week for another Life Support Live.
Check out the poll on the Facebook page. And Trek well, everybody.
Bye, everyone.